Hi guys. Hi Robert. So, first things first, comment of the week. Drum roll please. And comment of the week. Congratulations, Robert X. I like the Greek gods. At least they all have some human weaknesses, much better than the other quote unquote perfect god that isn't that perfect if you believe the book. Loved this one. Thank you so much, Robert. Now, like I said, in order to be in the running for the comment of the week, you do not have to agree with me, but you do have to comment on one of my edited videos. And I'd rather have something to get a conversation going. But this week, at least for Americans, has been a wild ride, and I haven't gotten that much in way of edited videos done. On that note, I have great news. Um, it seems that Mike Pence is not going to invoke the 25th Amendment. However, this is the good news. Everybody is acting like he is not the president. So that's good news. And hopefully, we just got to get through the next 11 days. So, and today in history, let's do that. In 1719, January 9th, Philip V of Spain declares war on France. January 9th, 1776, Thomas Paine publishes Common Sense, a scathing attack on King George III's reign over the colonies and a call for complete independence. And one more. The Ottomans sign a treaty with the Russians, ending a 5-year war. So that is today in history. Sometimes I get my today in history from HistoryNet, which is where I got this today's in history. Normally I would get it from from history.com, but it just depends on whether or not history.com has something interesting, which it didn't interest me. It might interest you, but it didn't interest me. So, now on to the main event, making fun of the Bible. Alrighty. So, I am just going to skip over chapter 36 because it's just genealogy, and it's made up a genealogy at that. So I'm just going to skip over it. And so on to chapter 37 of Genesis. Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. This is the account of Jacob's family line. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought their father a bad report about them. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons because he had been born to him in his old age, and he made an ornate robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it." His brothers said to him, "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?" And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. Then he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers. "Listen," he said, "I had another dream, and this time the sun and moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me." When he told his father as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, "What is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you?" His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. Okay. Uh, that's funny, Robert. People, dreams are just dreams, okay? They're just they're just random neuronal firings. They mean nothing. I understand, and I don't believe this ever happened. We can't we cannot be sure of anything in Israel or what is known as Israel happening until King Saul. That's in my Emergence of Israel series. If you want the proof on that, go to that series. Um, Dreams are random neuronal firings. Now, during this time, I understand that dreams had prophetic value. And even today, dreams are, I'm not going to say prophetic because I don't believe that, but our dreams integrate what we learned that day into what we already had stored in our memory. So it's kind of a consolidation process. And so you can kind of put together pieces of a puzzle in your dream, and then when you wake up you'll have the pieces to the puzzle there. But that's not prophecy. That's just how the brain works. Moving on. Oh, and by the way, uh, Rachel, who is Joseph's mother, never bows down to him because she dies giving birth to Benjamin. You know, whoever made up that whoever made up these stories can't even keep the story straight. Just saying. Okay, verse 12. Now his brothers had gone to graze their father's flock near Shechem, and Israel said to Joseph, As you know, your brothers are grazing the flocks near Shechem. Come, I am going to send you to them. Very well, he replied. So he said to him, Go and see if all is well with your brothers and with the flocks, and bring word back to me. Then he sent him off from the valley of Hebron. When Joseph arrived at Shechem, a man found him wandering around in the fields and asked him, What are you looking for? He replied, I'm looking for my brothers. Can you tell me where they are grazing their flocks? All right, let's stop there. The writer of this story is assuming that this man, who is not named, knows Joseph and knows who Joseph's brothers are. Again, can't they keep their story straight? They can't even keep their story straight in one friggin' story, let alone the whole Bible. Verse 17. They have moved on from here, the man answered. I heard them say, Let's go to Dothan. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them near Dothan. But they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. Here comes that dreamer, they said to each other. Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams. Verse 21. When Reuben heard this, remember Reuben's the oldest of Jacob's sons. When Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. Let's not take his life, he said. Don't shed any blood. Throw him into the cistern here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him. Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father. So when Joseph came, so Reuben's plan was, yeah, go ahead and put him in a cistern, but don't do anything else. And Reuben's plan, hey, Marianne, was apparently to get Joseph back to his dad. Well, Reuben's plan didn't work. Verse 23. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the ornate robe he was wearing, and they took him and threw him into the cistern. The cistern was empty. There was no water in it. As they sat down to eat their meal, they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh, and they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood. His brothers agreed. So now Judah's piping up and saying, Hey, we should make money off of this kid. Let's sell him to the Egyptians. Hey, Lisa. Okay. For those of you who may not know, Judah is the dude that supposedly fathered the tribe, that supposedly gave line to David, that supposedly gave rise to the Christ. This is the line God chose. This is one messed up God. That's all I'm saying. Verse 28. So when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him to Egypt. When Reuben returned to the cistern and saw that Joseph was not there, he tore his clothes. He went back to his brothers and said, "The boy isn't there. Where can I turn now?" Then they got Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, and dipped the robe in the blood. This book has so much blood in it. Verse 32. They took the ornate robe back to their father and said, "We found this. Examine it to see whether it is your son's robe." He recognized it and said, "It is my son's robe. Some ferocious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. "No," he said, "I will continue to mourn until I join my son in the grave." So his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. Nice. Great one. God condones slavery, people. I'm just kidding. I don't believe in this God. Chapter 38. At that time, Judah left his brothers and went down to stay with a man of Adullam named Hira. There Judah met the daughter of a Canaanite man named Shua. He married her and made love to her. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son whose name was She conceived again and gave birth to a son and named him Onan. She gave birth to still another son and named him Shelah. It was at Kezib that she gave birth to him. Judah got a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the Lord's sight, so the Lord put him to death. Oh, what did he do? Free a slave? Verse 8. Then Judah said to Onan, "Sleep with your brother's wife and fulfill your duty for your brother." But Onan knew that the child would not be his. That's not how reproduction works, people. I mean, seriously, if this had been given by divine inspiration, you would think that the God of the universe would know how reproduction works. So whenever he slept with his brother's wife, he spilled his semen on the ground to keep from providing offspring for his brother. What he did was wicked in the Lord's sight, so the Lord put him to death also. God just loves putting people to death for no reason at all. Verse 11. Judah then said to his daughter-in-law Tamar, "Live as a widow in your father's household until my son Shelah grows up." for he thought he may die too, just like his brothers. So Tamar went to live in her father's household. After a long time, Judah's wife, the daughter of Shua, died. When Judah had recovered from his grief, he went up to Timnah to the men who were shearing his sheep, and his friend Hira, the Adullamite, went with him. When Tamar was told, "Your father-in-law is on his way to Timnah to shear his sheep," she took off her widow's clothes, covered herself with a veil to disguise herself, and then sat down at the entrance to Enom, which is on the road to Timnah. For she saw that, though Shelah had now grown up, she had not been given to him as his wife. Hey, Otangelo. Hey, Brainbug. Otangelo, I don't dedicate so much time to denying it. I dedicate this time to show how ridiculous it is. Uh okay, I gotta find my place now. Okay. Verse 15. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a prostitute. Oh, this is something else you will never, ever, ever hear in Sunday school. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a prostitute, for she had covered her face. Not realizing that she was his daughter-in-law, he went over to her by the roadside and said, "Come now, let me sleep with you." "And what will you give me to sleep with you?" she asked. "I'll send you a young goat from my flock," he said. "Will you give me something as a pledge until you send it?" she asked. He said, "What pledge should I give you?" "Your seal and its cord and the staff in your hand," she answered. So he gave them to her and slept with her, and she became pregnant by him. After she left, she took off her veil and put on her widow's clothes again. Again, this is the dude God chose for David's line, allegedly, and from David to Christ, allegedly. And like I said, you are not going to hear this in Sunday school. Otangelo, haven't made up my mind on that one, buddy. I'm still looking into it. I'm still sifting through all the evidence for and against. Okay? I'm still looking into it, I promise. Verse 20. Meanwhile, Judah sent the young goat by his friend, the Adullamite, in order to get his pledge back from the woman, but he did not find her. He asked the men who lived there, "Where is the shrine prostitute who was beside the road at Enom?" Oh, so not only was she a prostitute, she was a shrine prostitute, which means that by sleeping with her, Judah actually committed idolatry. Wait, shouldn't God put him to death for that? There hasn't been any shrine prostitute here, they said. So he went back to Judah and said, I didn't find her. Besides, the men who lived there said, there hasn't been any shrine prostitute here. Then Judah said, let her keep what she has, or we will become a laughingstock. After all, I did send her this young goat, but you didn't find her. About 3 months later, Judah was told, your daughter-in-law Tamar is guilty of prostitution, and as a result, she is now pregnant. Judah said, bring her out and have her burned to death. What about you, Judah? What about you? I mean, you slept with a prostitute. If Tamar prostituting herself warrants a death penalty, doesn't you sleeping with a prostitute warrant the death penalty? Verse 25. As she was being brought out, she sent a message to her father-in-law. I am pregnant by the man who owns these, she said. And she added, see if you recognize whose seal and cord and staff these are. Judah recognized them and said, she is more righteous than I, since I wouldn't give her to my son Shelah. And he did not sleep with her again. Again, people, you're not going to hear this in Sunday school. Verse 27, when the time came for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. As she was giving birth, one of them put out his hand. So the midwife took a scarlet thread and tied it on his wrist and said, this came out first. But when he drew back his hand, his brother came out. And she said, so this is how you have broken out. And he was named Perez. Then his brother, who had the scarlet thread on his wrist, came out, and he was named Zerah. Yeah, this actually goes to show how much men knew about childbirth. Chapter 39. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian who was one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard, brought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. The Lord was with Joseph so that he prospered, and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. When his master saw that the Lord was with him and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household, and he entrusted to his care everything he owned. From the time he put him in charge of his household and of all that he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in the house and in the field. Yeah, either that or Joseph was just a shrewd businessman. Ever thought of that? Verse 6. So Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care. With Joseph in charge, he did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. Now Joseph was well built and handsome, and after a while his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, come to bed with me. But he refused. With me in charge, he told her, my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns, he has entrusted to my care. No one is greater in this house than I am. Whoa! Get that ego in check, Joseph. My master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God? And though she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her or even be with her. One day, he went into the house to attend to his duties, and none of the household servants was inside. She caught him by his cloak and said, "Come to bed with me." But he left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. When she saw that he had left his cloak in her hand and had run out of the house, she called her household servants. "Look," she said to them, "this Hebrew has been brought to us to make sport of us. He came in here to sleep with me, but I screamed. When he heard me scream for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house." She kept his cloak beside her until his master came home. Then she told him this story: that Hebrew slave you brought us came to me to make sport of me. But as soon as I screamed for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house. When his master heard the story, his wife told him, saying, "This is how your slave treated me." Again, God is condoning slavery. Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. But while Joseph was in the prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in the prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care, because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. Okay, I want to stop there and then I'll move on to chapter 40. Again, this is recurrent. This is Jewish literature. They pick a pattern and they stick with it. He was Top Gun at Potiphar's house, and now he's Top Gun in the prison. And it's just a literary device. That's all it is. And this isn't the only time you're going to see that. Okay, chapter 40, verse 1. Sometime later, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their master, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh was angry with his two officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in the same prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard assigned them to Joseph, and he attended them. After they had been in custody for some time, each of the two men, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were being held in prison, had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. When Joseph came to them the next morning, he saw that they were dejected. So he asked Pharaoh's officials who were in custody with him in his master's house, "Why do you look so sad today?" "We both had dreams," they answered. but there is no one to interpret them. Then Joseph said to them, do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams. Okay, so I'm going to stop right here. That's called divination. And God expressly forbids divination. And yet, Joseph isn't the only one who practices divination in the Bible. And yet, God decides it's okay for divination to happen when he deems it necessary for divination to happen. But other people can't have revelations of dreams and stuff like that. Not that I believe divination is a thing. I'm just saying he's not constant. I mean, if you hate divination, why didn't you put Joseph to death? Because that's what God says. Diviners should be put to death. Okay. Well, God, you should strike down Joseph. Verse 9. So the chief cupbearer told Joseph his dream. He said to him, in my dream, I saw a vine in front of me, and on this vine were 3 branches. As soon as it budded, it blossomed, and its clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and put the cup into his hand. Really? This guy needed an interpreter for this dream. Like I said, not that I believe this ever happened, but the dream is self-evident. Aside from it being random neuronal firings in your brain during sleep. Verse 12. This is what it means, Joseph said to him. The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, and this is another thing you'll see in Jewish literature. Certain numbers repeat themselves. 3 is a huge number that repeats itself. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your position, and you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, just as you used to when you were his cupbearer. But when all goes well with you, remember me and show me kindness. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison. I was forcibly carried off from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing to deserve being put in a dungeon. When the chief baker saw that Joseph had given a favorable interpretation, uh-oh, he said to Joseph, I too had a dream. On my head were 3 baskets of bread. In the top basket were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating them out of the basket on my head. This is what it means, Joseph said. The 3 baskets are 3 days. It didn't even take a whole sentence, did it? For the pattern to repeat. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift off your head and impale your body on a pole, and the birds will eat away your flesh. Ew. I don't know. This baker must have really pissed off Pharaoh. Now the third day was Pharaoh's birthday, and he gave a feast for all his officials. He lifted up the heads of the chief cupbearer and the chief baker in the presence of his officials. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position so that he once again put the cup into Pharaoh's hand. But he impaled the chief baker just as Joseph said to them in his interpretation. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. Okay, so I want to address that. Um, a lot of Christians are going to say, "Well, look, the quote unquote visions that God gives his prophets are they always come true." Well, duh. That's because they're in the same book. I mean, if your purpose is to try to persuade someone to believe in your God, you're not going to say, "Oh, his vision didn't come true." That makes no sense. So anyway, um, that was the end of chapter 40. And oh, Robert, you're so funny. I have no idea. But at any rate, you know, it's just like, they talk about with Joseph in his dream and talking about his mother and his father. Well, his mother can't bow down to him. They already forgot that they killed off Rachel. How can we take this book seriously when they can't even keep their own story straight? Tangela, you still in chat, Betty? You know, and when I get to, and this isn't going to be for a while, but when I get to First and Second Kings and First and Second Chronicles, I'm going to be, um, instead of doing First Kings, Second Kings, First Chronicles, Second Chronicles, I will be doing. They cover roughly the same period, so I will be doing a matchup between um, Kings and Chronicles, um, and you will see how really messed up the Bible is. Because I mean, you think this is bad. You think this is bad that they forgot that they already killed off Rachel. First and Second Kings and First and Second Chronicles are really bad. So anyway, like I said, there is good news today. Um, Mike Pence is not going to um, do amendment, the 25th Amendment. However, it's basically a de facto 25th Amendment at this time because his Joint Chiefs, his White House staff, everybody, unless they're diehard, they're just going to ignore his orders. So anyway, yeah. And not only not only did I just find a contradiction in these few chapters, okay? Two contradictions, actually. Not only did I find two contradictions in these chapters, okay? And there's more to come, believe me. There's more to come. But you cannot ignore the fact that you have to do a lot of mental gymnastics. A lot of mental gymnastics to believe this book. That's all I got to say. Lisa, the Shroud of Turin is a fraud. It's been known for 20 years that it's a fraud. So anyway, so good news on the home front, people. Um, Test what, Robert? DNA on the shroud? Well, it's a moot point because the Vatican won't let anybody. This is true, Robert. Oh, I forgot. He's got God DNA. So that's it. If we find God DNA on the Shroud of Turin, it's got to be Jesus' grave cloth. Oh, wait a minute. God DNA isn't a thing, is it? Lisa, they also see a Jesus face in the grilled cheese. It's called pareidolia. We're pattern seekers by nature. So, you know, at any rate, um, we just got to get through the next 11 days, guys. And with Trump pretty much cut off because his nobody's listening to him. Nobody. And he's basically in a social media blackout, so he can't try anything. Oh, Robert, I got to say that. Um, so, yeah, uh, we just got to get through the next 11 days. Uh, yeah, Marion, I do know that. Believe it or not. Um, the other one was Herod, right? Okay, Marianne, have a good day. All right. Alrighty, so I guess since that's all I got for you today, I guess I'll go ahead and leave you guys to it. You have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful day, and um, we are we're in the countdown, guys. So at least, so anyway, I will let you guys go. Bye. Oh, before I go, check out my merch store on Teespring or on my website. Links are not in the description yet, but they will be. But the links are on my other videos. Also, if you would like to support this channel, you may do so on my PayPal link. I also now have super chats if you want to do it that way. So I will talk to you guys later. Bye.